Good morning, everybody.
Hello.
Hi there, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome, okay, great. We're here this morning on Thompson versus CTEC, case number 20 CT 13600. Do we have everybody in the room that needs to be here this morning?
I believe so.
Danny, I'm on here, please.
Okay. I believe I see there's a Mr. Larkin up on the left, there's Mr. Salazar down on the right, and then we have Vaney and Paul Thompson on the bottom, and then I see somebody who's just logged in named Bruce Norton that's coming on. So let's make sure we have everybody.
I believe we might be waiting for Paul
And
Wasberg as well.
That Mr. Wasberg is also just logging on. All right, I think we've got everybody now. Okay, so can whoever's over Zoom tell me who's here for the plaintiff, which would be Mr. Thompson?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. And is there anybody else who's in the room, Mr. Thompson, that's here that's going to testify in your case, sir, and Chief?
Well, my wife's in the room. She's aware of everything that has gone on.
Okay. Is there anybody else that's here that is also going to be testifying for you, Mr. Thompson?
No.
Okay, thank you. All right, and so who's here? Is there anyone here for CTEC, which is the defendant?
I am.
Are you a witness, sir, or are you the defendant?
Well,
I'm the
What is that, Mr. Salazar?
oh, okay. No, I was just the technician that worked on the boat afterwards.
Okay, thank you. All right, and is anyone here that is actually here for CTEC, that is the defendant? Mr.
Paul
Wasberg?
Wasberg. Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, and who's everybody else, please?
I'm with CTEC as well as the technician that worked on the boat.
Okay, thank you.
Also with CTEC, Bruce Norton, General Manager.
Okay, thank you, everyone. All right, so the way that my trials proceed is the plaintiff has the opportunity first to present his side of the case, which means he'll be able to testify, and he'll also be able to call his wife as a witness because he's indicated that she would also like to testify. When the individuals are testifying, I would ask that everyone mute their microphone, because if the microphones aren't muted, then it causes a lot of feedback over the Zoom process. After Mr. Thompson has testified, Mr. Wasberg, if you have any questions for Mr. Thompson, you can always ask questions once his testimony has concluded. You don't have to, but you can. I let people know that because sometimes people they just want to tell their side of the story. They may not have questions, but they want to tell their side of the story, which you'll be able to do once we get into your case in chief, okay? And the same goes with Ms. Thompson. If she testifies and you have questions for her, you can ask her questions once she's done testifying. And the same goes true, Mr. Thompson. When Mr. Wasberg puts on his case in chief and calls his witnesses, you will have an opportunity to ask questions of any of those witnesses if you want to, okay?
Okay.
All right. Okay, so first and foremost, anybody who's going to give testimony in this case needs to raise their right hand and be sworn, please. Including Ms. Thompson. I need to get her into the frame, please.
Yeah.
Hi there. Do you swear and affirm that the testimony you all shall give this morning will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
I do.
All right, thank you, everybody. You can put your hand down. I have received a stack of exhibits, and I'm wondering whether everyone has seen all of the exhibits that have been presented and whether anyone objects to the exhibits.
No objections.
No objection, Mr. Wasberg. Mr. Thompson, any objection?
I had objection to the notarized statement that Sergio had given.
Okay, well, my understanding is that Sergio would be Sergio Salazar, and he's actually going to be testifying today. So we wouldn't
Okay.
need his notarized statement because we're going to take testimony from him.
Okay.
Okay. And other than that,
Oh.
Your Honor?
no? Okay.
No,
So
you
what
don't.
I'll need to have you all do when you give your testimony is advise the court what exhibits that the court has received and what exhibits are being admitted so that I'll know. As I said, I've gotten a stack of exhibits and I'm not exactly sure whose exhibits are what. One of them is a Wells Fargo online payment. It looks like of $602.41. Did that come from the plaintiff or the defendant?
Came from the plaintiff.
Okay. And then there's a picture of a Grady white boat and it's exhibit A. Is that from you, Mr. Thompson, or is that for me,
That's
Mr.
for me.
Wasberg?
Yes, there's a group of pictures there, and
Okay,
I listed
have the
them.
pictures A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. And then
That's it.
there is a printout, looks like from a website that says CTech, print your picture doesn't print. Is that from you to Mr. Thompson or from you, Mr. Wasberg? Looks like this.
That's for me.
Okay. It is not marked as an exhibit. Is it intended as an exhibit or no?
Yes, it is, because they have a policy to guarantee
Okay,
their
well,
work.
my question to you is I just need to know what they're gonna, because some of these exhibits are marked and some are not marked. I've got A, B, C, A through H, which are pictures. And then those appear to be the only marked exhibits. And exhibits have to be properly marked in order for the clerk to keep track of them. So I'm going to take exhibits A through H, which are your pictures, and those will be your identification of those pictures. Then I'm going to mark the check, the Wells Fargo online payment, which is in the amount of $602.41. I'm going to mark that as plaintiff's exhibit I. I'm going to mark the CTech website as plaintiff's exhibit J. Let's see what else I got here. That way we can keep track of everything.
Okay,
Then there is a Discover statement which shows a payment to CTech Marine in the amount of $383.88. That's also yours, Mr. Thompson?
that's correct. Yes.
I'm going to mark that as K.
What's K?
Then there's
Payment.
another, actually, the next one
Wells
appears to
Fargo.
be that online payment of $602.48. There's an invoice from Marco Yacht Sales for $602.41. That's also yours, sir?
Yes, it is.
All right, that will be exhibit L.
L.
Make sure I keep these in order. That's 602.41. There's another one, it's the exact same amount of 602.41. You just make sure.
I guess one's from CTech, one's from me.
One says Marco Yacht Sales, invoice number 34146, and the other one says Marco Yacht Sales 34146. It's the same thing. So the next thing I see is, it looks like an invoice from the clerk of courts for the filing fee and the sheriff's office fees. I'm going to mark that as exhibit M.
Okay,
And then the next thing I see are some voicemails. And it looks like it's from CTech to you, sir. And let's mark that as exhibit N. And then the next thing I see is a total details of this transaction,
yes.
which would be exhibit O. Small claims court on CTech, Marine Electronics, which will be P. Then we have a Verizon bill. It looks like Vaney Tuthill.
Yes, that's my wife,
Okay,
and that's proof that I made these calls.
okay. And that will be exhibit Q. And then, let's see. So those are the plaintiff's exhibits.
Your Honor, real quick,
What's that?
the clerk's office never received any exhibits.
Okay. What I will do is when we have a break, if we take a break, I'll have Jen copy all these,
Okay.
because you should have gotten them. All right, then the next thing I have is, looks like the information from the defendant, and these are also not marked. The first thing I see is an email dated March 7th, 2020, which is an email with an invoice from CTech. And it looks like there's also an attached picture. I don't know, Mr. Wasberg, do you want these marked separately? Hold on one second. Hello?
Hi, Judge. Did everyone log in okay?
Yes, everyone's fine. Everyone's here, I think. Do you have someone who's saying they're having trouble?
Mr. Thompson, is he in?
Yes, he's in.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, bye. So my assistant received an email and it has an email from Kathy Duell to Mr. Thompson, an invoice from CTEC to Mr. Thompson, a picture of what appears to be maybe an engine, like with, or maybe a gas cap, then a whole bunch of electronic looking
You want to
stuff.
just, would you like to just start from the top, that first one?
Yes. Do you
Exhibit
want
A,
me to
or
mark these as one exhibit, or do you want me to mark each individually? I guess that's my question.
each individually, please?
Okay, so then the email will be Defendant's Exhibit 1. The first input, the invoice will be Defendant's Exhibit 2. The first picture with the gas cap will be Defendant's Exhibit 3. The fourth picture with the all the electronic stuff,
Looks like hoses and wires.
wires, and there's a, looks like a buoy on the top. And then there's another picture with what looks like a carburetor, but I'll tell you what, I don't know if it is. Number 5, I have actually seen a carburetor before, but that's probably not what that is on a boat. What is it?
It's the back of his steering system. It's fine.
There we go. And then there's a certification with a seal, which is Sergio Salivar's. That one is that one is objected to. It'll be marked for identification as number 6, but it will not be admitted. And then there's a written notice from Marco Yacht Sales, which will be marked as exhibit number 7. So I will be admitting all of the exhibits except for defendant's exhibit number 6, which if Mr. Salazar is going to actually testify, I don't really think that I need, to tell you the truth. And then of course, I'll provide a copy of all of these, or I may end up just giving you all of the originals, April, at the end of this, because I won't hold on to them, but I've marked them all so you'll have them, okay?
Thank you very much.
All right. So, Mr. Thompson, do you want to explain to me why you're here and tell me what happened and what you're looking for today, sir?
Okay, I'm going to use Exhibit O, for the total details of this transaction.
Okay.
Okay,
Oh,
on
hold on a
Wednesday,
Wait a minute. Let me move to O. Okay. Yes, sir.
okay, on Wednesday, February 19th, I called CTEC and spoke with Brittany to schedule service on my autopilot system because I had accidentally deleted my waypoints, routes, and other features.
Your what in other features? I'm sorry.
Waypoints, routes, I deleted things in the system accidentally. So I called, CTEC to help me out with this. What had happened is after I deleted these waypoints, routes, and other features in the system, my wife and I tried to contact Simrad, the manufacturer of this equipment, and tried to reinstate it ourselves. We spent 2 hours talking with them, and we finally got it to work. It lasted 1 day. So then I figured I need some professional help. So I called CTEC and told them that for 2 years, my 2004 Grady White boat was operating perfectly without any problems. And I was trying to program fuel display on my twin tanks along with other operations. And I deleted everything accidentally, did a global reset. On Friday, February 28th, called CTEC to let them know that CTEC called me to let me know that Kelly, a technician, would be coming to my boat on March 3rd at 8:30 in the morning. On Tuesday, 3:03, Kathy from CTEC called to tell me that he was running late. And when Kelly arrived, I told him that I messed up the autopilot program, and the autopilot system was working great. Kelly did a dockside commission on the autopilot. We went for a short ride, and the autopilot system worked perfectly. Kelly then determined that the port fuel level sensor was defective. He said he would order it and return in a few days. Kelly then said he noticed
Hold on 1 second. You're going a little bit too fast for me to write. I'm sorry. I just need to stop you for a second. So
Okay.
He came back, or he said the port fuel level sensor was broken and he needed to reorder it?
He needs to reorder it.
Okay, thank you.
Kelly then said he noticed a slight hesitation on my engines and that I probably have air trapped in the system. He then added a couple of ounces of hydraulic oil into the steering system turned the steering a few times, and this fluid leaked out. He then said that I had a defective cap, so he would order a new cap. 10 days later, I called C-Tech and they told me that the parts just came in. He was going to be there on Monday, the 16th of March. I had, at 8 o'clock, I had called at 8:37 and they told me that he wouldn't be there until the afternoon. Kelly arrived at 1:45. He installed the port fluid level sensor. He then changed the cap that he reordered, saying that the cap was defective, and that was the reason that this oil was leaking out. So he put the new cap in and added some oil, and that all leaked out. Kelly said that I needed a new steering housing and that they have some units at their location for $1,000 plus labor. I told him that I would think about it. After holding, I then called C-Tech to let them know that this hydraulic oil was leaking and that autopilot was locked out again, and the autopilot wasn't working, it wasn't functioning. After holding on the phone for 26 minutes to speak with Bruce, Kathy said that she would have Bruce call me back. On March 18th.
Give me 1 second, sorry. I can write really super fast, but not that fast.
Okay,
1
I'm
second.
sorry.
That's okay.
And I'm kind of summarizing some of this.
Yeah, I
all
know.
in
It's just,
Exhibit O.
I'm trying to keep up with you, and I just want to make sure I don't miss anything. All right, so Kathy says Bruce will call you back, and then what happened?
Bruce left a voice message saying that my computer had crashed and it would be around $4,500 to replace this autopilot unit. I had left in documentation on the voicemail, but I had the actual phone conversation saying that it would be $4,500 to replace my autopilot system. On Monday, Bruce said that he would send a different technician to evaluate the steering system. Now, the steering system, I've never had any problems with it prior to this time that Kelly tried to install this hydraulic fluid and then wanted $1,000 to replace a part that to this day is working perfectly. No parts have been replaced. Everything works well right now after Sergio had done some repairs. On Friday, March 27th, another technician, Corey, came. He operated the steering system a little bit. He was told not to do anything with the autopilot system. He said that Bruce would call me back. I tipped him $20. I also tipped Kelly $20. On Sunday, 3/29. Oops, I have somebody out my front door. Received indication of a missed call. I have a recording of that if you wanted to hear it, if there's any objection to it. But Bruce
What is the call going to tell me?
me. Excuse me?
What will the call tell the court, sir?
That he's telling me that my system crashed, that it's no good, and that it's $4,500, around $4,500 to repair. And if there was something wrong with the, let me see, Bruce said that that other parts would have to be repaired, would be additional besides the auto part. Wednesday, I called C-Tech and Sophie because Bruce promised to send some pictures. I told CTEC that I never received the pictures. Sophie at CTEC told me that she would send them again. I called back. I told her that I never received the pictures. We then decided that I would send an email to Sophie at parts.ctec.net, and Sophie will forward back the pictures. And then later that afternoon, I received the pictures. Somehow, CTEC was trying to send information to my email, but I never received it. And the only way I did receive it is if I sent them an email and they replied on my email. I called Collier County Clerk to find out about how to file a small claims. She told me that because of the COVID, things are really backed up and that I should try and negotiate with CTEC. I called CTEC, I spoke with Kathy. I told her that I was upset with being told that I had to pay $1,000 for a part that doesn't need to be replaced, or $4,500 on replacing my autopilot, which I didn't think had to be replaced. And to this day, none of it has been replaced and it's working perfectly. I called CTEC again after waiting on the phone for a while, for 26 minutes. I told her that I was going to file a small claims unless we can sit down and negotiate something. They never called me back. They ignored me. So on May 11th, I filed a small claims. I claimed $602 because that's what I was charged by Marco Yacht Sales. It was $175 for the filing fee and $40 to deliver it. So I'm suing for $817.41.
Okay. What was the amount? 800 and what?
What was the amount, what?
800 and what?
$817.41.
Thank you. All right. Mr. Wasberg, do you have any questions for Mr. Thompson?
I do. I would like to have a bit of a back and forth, but I mean, can we break this down into smaller segments to make this, I guess what my two things I'd like to just make clear that there's two
Not make
separate.
clear, it has to be a question. This is
Okay.
the opportunity for you to ask questions. If you want to tell me your side of the story, I'll give you that opportunity as soon as I hear from
Okay,
Ms. Thompson.
Then I have just one question for Mr. Thompson right now anyway.
Okay.
How was the, when you said that you accidentally deleted your system settings, what display did you do that on? Your
Paul,
SIMRAD, your large screen?
Paul, on that SIMRAD, there are so many options in that system that as I was navigating through all the different programs, I probably hit global reset
On the big screen.
On the big screen. And when I tried to operate my system after being in that computer system, everything was wiped out. All my routes, waypoints, everything was taken out. And my object was to get rid of the previous owner's stuff that was in there.
Right.
And
I
just have
understand that because
my stuff.
Right. I understand that because you bought a used boat and you want to get rid of their waypoints, routes, and tracks and what have you.
Yes.
And you believe you also deleted the autopilot settings in this procedure.
Well, the thing is that the autopilot worked before, and
Mhm.
after I was inside there doing things, the autopilot didn't work. So I'm assuming that I screwed something up.
Okay. The autopilot cannot be reset, but from the autopilot display itself, not from the main screen. What is, Judge, I don't know if this is a part where I need to just simply testify or questions
Not
back
yet.
and forth.
No, not yet, not yet.
Okay.
The way that it has to work is that he gets a chance to testify and then put his wife on, and then you have the opportunity also to testify. So you can
Gotcha.
clarify, sir, for me, points that you don't think are well taken from the plaintiff's side, but your opportunity will
Okay.
come after
That's my
Ms.
only question
Thompson
then right now.
testifies. Okay. All right. So Mr. Thompson, do you want to have your wife also testify?
We went out, we got the thing working for a day, and then it failed.
Okay.
Mr. Thompson, you can't tell your wife what to say.
Oh, okay.
I'm allowing you to be together in the same room, which would not be normal if you were in my courtroom, but she has to use her own words if she wants to.
I want to say that we did have the issue of how the system was erased. We did try and work with Simrad to restore it. We also worked with CTEC to restore the system, and then we brought in another company and they restored the system, and it's been working wonderfully since that event.
Okay.
So the fact that CTEC is claiming that we needed to replace the whole system, replace the computer, apparently isn't justified.
Thank you. Mr. Wasberg, do you have any questions for Ms. Thompson?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. All right, so Mr. Wasberg, this is your opportunity to provide the court with information on your side of the case. And I see you also have several individuals that you have prepared to testify. Do you want to testify first, or would you like to have the other individuals testify?
Yeah, I'd like to go first, please.
Okay, I'm ready for you.
Okay. Well, I guess to start with, the boat is 16 years old and it has an autopilot that is very old. The autopilot essentially is a computer that has memory that it's called non-volatile memory, but as any electronics over time, things fail. I am quite convinced, as is I'm sure Bruce will testify as well, and Kelly, that his autopilot computer is losing its settings. It's lost it on its own accord. He could not have done it from the screen. That's why I asked him about this larger screen if he did a reset from there. The autopilot can't be reset from where he was trying to get rid of the previous owner's waypoints and what have you. The memory of this autopilot computer is for sure corrupt and not repairable, and it's too old to be repairable, and the only solution is the only solution would be a new system, because what's currently manufactured is not compatible with his autopilot parts, and that's where this 4,500 or so comes from. So what's happening with the autopilot right now, it's running on its default settings. It's most certainly not the most optimum settings, but that's probably how it's running. Otherwise, my technician Kelly would not have had 2 sea trials to calibrate it, and Sergio from Marco Yacht Sales has also tried to make another calibration of it. Every time the machine's turned off, back on, it's back to its default settings. That's one problem that I don't think Mr. Thompson recognizes. Secondly, his steering system does have issues. There is incorrect hoses being used. There are high spots that trap air. Mr. Thompson is not qualified to understand. He just doesn't know, essentially, what a correct steering system is. If the steering system has any air at all in it, it affects how the autopilot steers the boat. So that steering system has to be completely clear of air. And the way it was installed some 14 years ago, it really wasn't done right. I'm surprised it's even gone this long, quite frankly. But it just, to me, it appears that Mr. Thompson's trying to hold us liable for how the steering system was designed from years ago. Aside from that, we've trying to appease him. We have discounted our invoice significantly, which would be that Exhibit 1 and 2. Exhibit 1 showing that we did indeed email, and Mr. Thompson also just stated earlier in his testimony that he was having emailing problems, receiving email problems. But anyway, if you look at Exhibit 2 then, which is our invoice, you can see that we've actually tried to help him out and just discount off labor. We even took the one very insignificant part. It's not the real fix of the steering system, but it was our best quick shot at it. But it's like a $20 cap. We even discounted that off to try to help him out. But for sure, his steering system still has issues, whether he realizes it or not. There cannot be trapped air in there. Kelly, my technician, spent a lot of time trying to get the air out. He went through at least a half a quart of oil trying to get there. Sergio, this other company, same thing. He had to keep adding oil. That's not normal. That's a defective steering system that needs oil added to it. The invoice from Marco Yacht Sales has a line item for adding hydraulic oil. If there was no problem with the steering system, the very first time Kelly may have had to top it off, it should have been done. There should have been no need for further oil being added, for further attempts to purge the system. Yet again, 2 more times after that, because it's defective. Is it working? Yeah, to some point it is working, but it's not working well enough, and it's certainly not in a safe condition or in a way that an autopilot would be able to control the boat properly. That's pretty much all I have for right now.
Okay. All right, Mr. Thompson, do you have questions for Mr. Wasberg?
Oh, yes. Okay. Are you aware that 2 times Kelly tried to add oil to the system? It leaked out both times?
Because your air is trapped in the system. There's 3 lines in there. And I know you know your hoses, but for the judge's sake, Exhibit 4. Want me to pull it up on the screen?
I can see it. Okay, I'm ready. I'm looking at it right now.
Okay, it would help for Sergio and Kelly as well. Those 2 white hoses dead center are compression fitting hoses. They're supposed to be O-rings. Where they connect near the middle, there's 2 T fittings. Where they connect on center, the opposing hoses are of the O-ring or flare type, which can take high pressure. Compression is not the correct fittings for the high pressure side. So what is happening is that when there's air in the system and you turn your steering wheel, or the hydraulic pump for the autopilot tries to turn the engines, this air gets compressed to about 1/100th of its size and gets forced back and forth into the steering lines. And it eventually finds its way back into the reservoir line. And then when you sit there and wait for minutes, sometimes hours on end, the bubbles that were compressed down to 1/100th of their size start expanding back to atmospheric and then pushing fluid out your cap. That cap is relieving the pressure from the air trapped in the system, and it's coming out as hydraulic fluid. That is one of the fundamental problems with the steering system. The air is being induced, goes into the steering, then back into the reservoir side, expands back out. And that's why after Kelly left, you said it was leaking out. Well, it wasn't leaking out. It was going out the vented cap because it was overpressurized from the air being trapped in there. If you had 0 air in your steering system, there would be no leaks. The system's doing what it's supposed to do as far as that's concerned. Your high spots in the hoses are not letting the air get back to the helm to get vented properly on the reservoir side. So they indefinitely stay trapped in the steering side. Every time you turn your steering wheel, the air compresses to a much smaller volume and then expands back out into the reservoir side, thus going out the cap.
Mr. Wasberg, are you aware that from 2004 to the present time, 2021, those parts are still in the boat, and that when Kelly twice tried to put oil in, and each time it leaked out, he then blamed the cap that's on my picture C.
Yep.
He then tried to turn that cap with channel locks. It's a finger type cap, and he was turning it with channel locks and tighten it down, and it still leaked, and it leaked. So I would say that it's overfilled that there was no air. Maybe
There's
some
no
bubbles in
such
the
thing
system.
as overfill.
Wait, let me finish, let me finish.
Whoa, you guys aren't doing this. Oh, no, gentlemen. I understand that everybody gets a little bit animated, but we're not fighting over Zoom today. One at a time, take a deep breath, finish your question. Mr. Thompson, make sure it's a question. And then Mr.
Okay.
Wasberg, you can answer.
My question is, these parts are still in the boat. They are still working. I saw no hesitation on the system. And Kelly thought that by charging me $1,000 for a new helm plus labor would solve a problem where there was no problem. Isn't that so?
That is
Mr. Wasberg,
not,
you can answer.
yeah, that installation is not to ABYC standards, our standards that the marine industry go to. That is not a proper installation. Whether it's working as well as you think it is one thing. That's not a proper installation. It is not leaking. Your reservoir is being pressurized from air transfer and then expanding. It's going out the vented cap. It's the same as your car radiator. When it overpressurizes, eventually the cap lets some of it out so things don't get damaged. That's what's happening. It's not leaking.
My question is, if twice you try and put oil in and twice it leaks out, maybe there's no air in the system and maybe it was full of hydraulic oil.
Absolutely not the case. Then Sergio would not have to add oil. Then Kelly would not have to add oil after a second time. Kelly would have never needed to add oil in the first place if your system was in tip-top shape as you think it is, and it's not.
Why would you add oil to a system that's not broken? Why would you want to add oil two times, blame a cap that's on there two times, and there's still leaking oil out of the system, where I had no oil leaks in the past and to date have had no oil leaks. That's almost a full year since February to this January that this system has not leaked any oil and the steering has not been defective in any way. It has worked perfectly. The autopilot system is working perfectly, and for the autopilot system to work perfectly, doesn't the steering have to work good?
Okay, I think that's about 3 questions. The first question is, why would you add oil to a system if the system's not broken?
It is broken. There's air in the system. Kelly has observed symptoms of air, as in there's hesitation with the outboards turning when the wheel's being turned. There's absolutely air. There's no other way that oil would be pushed out the reservoir cap, especially after someone leaves.
The second question is, why would your technician blame the cap versus blaming the system, as you have stated, Mr. Wasberg?
Because it's a 14-year-old O-ring on the bottom of the cap. That is a very common problem, that O-rings crack over time. It's a cheap, easy solution. If that's where, now the cap is designed to hold back a little bit of pressure, same as your radiator in your car, not a lot, so it relieves when it needs to. But the O-ring was cracked. We got a new cap and O-ring, and it's doing its job. That is a likely cause of a leak, is the cracked O-ring. A quick solution is trying another one, not very expensive. Again, if he's got air trapped in his system, a new cap is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Let the overpressure out before it damages internal components.
Mr. Wasberg,
And then hold on, Mr. Thompson. I'm going to re-ask your questions because they were compound. The third question, as I understand it, is then why wouldn't Mr. Thompson continue to have these issues with the overflow if in fact there are difficulties with his system? Because what Mr. Thompson says is, well, over the last year, I haven't had any other problems. So if his system's defective, why wouldn't he still continue to have problems?
A perfect system would be 100% oil, no air at all. And you get to a point when you have a configuration like this that's trapping air, what happens is you get to a point that you have maybe 60-70% of oil of what you should have in your system, and now there's so much air still at the helm where the oil's stored that it has enough room inside the helm to expand into there and no longer push it out the cap. It's low on oil, but it's still enough to do steering. His understanding of perfect is not qualified whatsoever.
Okay. Ask your next question, Mr. Thompson, please.
Okay. If the reservoir is full of oil and you try to add more oil, isn't it logical that it would leak out? Even if you have an old cap and a new cap and it still leaks out? If it's full and you add oil, won't that oil leak out?
Maybe, I don't know, Kelly, would you like to explain this better, or Sergio perhaps? Because this is the same thing over and over again. Air is trapped in your lines in the back. That picture with the white tubes is a high spot that traps air. The helm is not the only place that has oil. Your lines, where the pump is, where those plastic fittings, hoses are, which are not proper, your steering cylinders on your outboards, all those areas can trap air. So the attempt, I know Kelly spent a lot of time trying to get air out of your system. And when there's high spots, you just can't flush it out by normal means, like most boats that are rigged properly. That's why Kelly has spent a fair amount of time trying to get all the air out that he could. But you still absolutely have trapped air. There's no question.
Why did Kelly even bother going into that system when there was no problem? His request was to fix my autopilot, not my steering. I had no idea there was any problems with my steering.
Exactly.
He said that there was slight hesitation and that I probably have air in there, and I didn't have air.
Yeah, you did. You had air in there. Kelly certainly can tell, as did Sergio, because he did the same thing. Two other qualified, experienced technicians must have turned your steering wheel, saw hesitation that your outboards are not moving immediately, which would affect the way that the autopilot would be steering your boat. The autopilot would also be experiencing these hesitations, which throws off how it gets calibrated.
Judge, I've owned a boat all my life.
This is not question, this is
Okay.
testimony.
Okay.
I know you want to tell me your story, but this is a time for questions.
Okay, when Kelly asked me or said that he saw hesitation in the system, I said I did not see any hesitation. But he said that probably there was some air caught in the system. And when he tried to put oil in, why did it leak out immediately? And then later on it leaked, and he only put in an ounce or two. And on my exhibits, E, F, and G, it shows that oil did leak out. And on exhibit G, it showed that the cap, both the old cap and the new cap, that the old cap, why was it, is it normal practice to tighten a finger type cap with channel locks and all your effort and then say it was defective?
Yes, sometimes when your housing's corroded and there's pitting, you have to do a little bit extra pressure on the rubber O-ring so that it seals throughout the pits and what have you. Using a channel lock is not that unusual. We're going in circles over this. Your hydraulics have a bad installation. Whoever did your autopilot back when, 14 years ago, it's running. Is it usable? Yes. Is it proper? No. Is it proper for an autopilot to be calibrated with air in the system? Absolutely not. And I have two other technician witnesses that know this as well as I do, that have gone to school for this stuff, same as I. You have not. Just because you turn a steering wheel and your outboards move, you're not conscious of how much air or if there's a delay in there. If I'm incorrect, then why would Sergio also have to add oil? Why would Kelly also have to add oil a second time? Because they're aware your steering system has a fault. You just are not. You're accustomed to how it is.
Paul, let me ask you something. Is Grady White considered a relatively well-built boat?
I would assume so, but whoever did those white hoses did not know what they're doing because they're compression fittings. That's improper.
And that's been there since 2004.
Not by the factory. They don't install autopilots from the factory.
Okay.
Some other knucklehead did it.
Okay, so. All right, on my question of, I cannot understand how he wants $1,000 plus labor to fix something that's not broken.
Possibly that. My understanding, Kelly wanted to look further into the hose situation, and you told him to stop going any further. It's not to say without digging in, truly fully digging in, which I don't believe you allowed us to do. So it may not have needed a helm, but somewhere there is bypassing going on. It could be in your steering cylinders as well. It could even be in the autopilot pump. But at some point, this air that's in your steering lines is getting by some probably semi-worn out parts and back into the reservoir, expanding back to atmospheric pressure and pushing it past the vent. You call it a leak, it's relieving itself of pressure to the point that it will leak down to about 60-70%. And then there's enough air in your upper part of your helm that it won't come out the vent anymore. You still have enough fluid to steer. That's part of the safety of how the helms are designed.
My next question is, I tried twice to discuss this with you prior to filing small claims. It was suggested, but why didn't you return my calls?
I wasn't even involved in this until it got to that point. I suppose that could be a question with Bruce. That's why I have him here. But yeah, there is a lot of calls from you, a whole lot.
Yes. Why didn't you call me back? Why didn't you work this thing out with me? Why don't you explain all of this stuff that I had to go out and get another company to fix the problems that CTEC screwed up?
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't you call back? Did you receive notice that I called you?
I'd rather Bruce answer this, if that's okay, but your demeanor on the phone and being a bit nasty, not understanding, same as you're not understanding what I'm trying to explain to you about the hydraulic problems that you have, that this needs to be addressed before we can go any further with the autopilot. We're not trying to sell you parts that you don't need. You're saying your autopilot computer is perfect. You're not qualified to even know that. The memory of your autopilot is definitely got a problem. And Bruce was even trying to find a used autopilot so you didn't have to buy a new system on eBay, some used one on eBay, just to help you out. So we just go in circles with you.
Are you aware that this system is still operating perfectly, and that the system
Mr. Thompson, you've asked that question about 5 times. I'm not going to let you ask it again.
Okay.
You've literally asked it like 5 times. He disagrees with you. You believe it's working perfectly. He doesn't. We need to move on from that.
Okay.
I don't think you gentlemen will ever agree on that issue.
Yeah. The boat's working good now.
Okay.
It was working good before CTEC touched it. And after CTEC was on the boat, it did not work. And that's the reason I called in another company.
Okay. And I understand that that's your claim today. And so what I want to hear from is I want to hear from some of the other witnesses who are here, maybe starting with Mr. Norton, because that's the one that we were just talking about recently. Mr. Wasberg, would you like Mr. Norton to testify at this point?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Mr. Norton, what can you tell the court, sir?
Well, I had several conversations with Mr. Thompson. And certainly I'm glad his boat's working now, and if his boat was working perfectly before he called us, he would have no reason to call us. And our conversations were always very difficult. And he would call many, many times with the same questions or comments over and over again. We do our best to try to keep happy customers. I discounted his invoice. I just did not. I got to a point where felt there was nothing more we could do to resolve the situation and make him happy. He was not listening or accepting any advice or any direction from us. So at that point, just no more to be said.
Okay. Mr. Thompson, you have questions?
Yes. Bruce, why did you say my system crashed when it did not crash?
When you your initial complaint was that you had lost your autopilot settings. That's a little bit difficult to do by accident, to default that. And the fact that it happened a second time after dockside was done, when you cycle power and the computer comes online and it's asking you to do the calibration again, tells me that it did not retain the information that was put in. That is an indication that the non-volatile memory in that computer is failing.
You know it didn't fail after Sergio commissioned the system? Another company commissioned the system? Did you know that?
I am not aware of that.
You're not aware that the system is working and that the system did not crash, as you stated?
We work off our experience and seeing this same issue before. That was my recommendation. We do our best. If we're incorrect and your boat is working, I'm happy it is. I didn't sell you anything, you declined. So it comes down to your opinion and my opinion. I don't see where the damage is in that.
Well, do you think you were trying to scam me by trying to sell me a housing for $1,000 and an autopilot system for $4,500 and it wasn't needed?
Absolutely not.
Why did you discount the bill?
As a customer service, to just try to appease you, that's just good customer service, trying to keep happy customers. You were unhappy that we spent more time than you thought it should have been, so I discounted it. And we go on our happy way. Apparently that was not enough.
Why did you not call me back 3 times that I tried calling you, and you had me holding on the phone for 26 minutes and then never call me back to discuss this information, even though I threatened to go to small claims court? Why did you not?
We did have that conversation, sir. The conversation was the same every time we talked. So it gets to a point where there is nothing further to be said.
Bruce, on Wednesday, April 1st, I called you and told you that my system was working, and why were you trying to bill me for additional $4,500?
I never billed you for $4,500.
You tried.
I was telling you that would be the price of a replacement system if your computer had indeed failed. I did not send you an invoice. I did not send you an estimate. That was, you asked what a new system was, and that is the number I gave you.
Bruce, I did not ask for what a new system would be. You told me my system crashed and it would be $4,500 to replace it, around $4,500, and that the pump would be additional onto that if that was defective. Isn't that so?
That is correct.
That's all for Bruce, Judge.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Wasberg, call your next witness, sir.
Kelly, please.
Mr. Larkin?
Yes. Can you all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
What can you tell the court, sir?
After the second visit and I had replaced the cap, we had determined that there was air in the system. I spoke with Mr. Thompson about it, said that there's air in your system. It might be introduced from a failing component. That's why we had discussed the options of replacing the helm, the $1,000 part he keeps referring to. But that was just a discussion at the time. We had not fully diagnosed that. We needed to dive in deeper into the system to find out where the air was being introduced or if there was an actual leak. If the fluid's leaking out, then it could potentially let air in. So we had a discussion while I was on the boat to see if he wanted me to move forward. He said no. So I stopped work and I left the boat.
Okay. Mr. Thompson?
Why did you even go into this system?
Because there was a lot of air in the system.
How do you know there was air in this system? Was the
Because when you
engines
turn the
not?
helm,
Hold on, Mr. Thompson, allow him to answer that question. Mr. Larkin, why did you determine there's air in the system?
there's a lot of slop in the steering helm. When you turn the wheel, the engine should turn. They were not turning. When you engage the autopilot and ask for a course correction, and it doesn't do that until you ask for an extreme course correction, that's evidence that there's air in the system. So I had every reason to believe he had air in the system, and it's a sealed system. So air's introduced somehow by a leak or a failing O-ring, something of that nature. So I attempted to move forward with his permission. He told me not to.
Mr. Thompson?
Okay, Kelly, first time you put oil into the system, it leaked out and you claimed that the cap was defective. Second time you put a brand new cap in after you put oil in and it leaked out all over. Why?
Because there's air in the system.
If there's oil leaking out each time, why wouldn't you have gotten the air out?
Because there's high points in your lines. The installation was incorrect.
How come I never noticed any hesitation in my steering? And how come the autopilot has worked since 2004? And now all of a sudden, it's not working because I screwed up the programming.
We're going to have to disagree on that. It's not functioning properly because there's air in the system.
I have hundreds of hours on the engines and never noticed any problem in the autopilot system working until I started to mess around in the programming and deleted the autopilot. And I requested only that the autopilot be recommissioned. And why did it not work after you recommissioned it? That was a question.
What's the question? I'm sorry.
It's after the second time you were there, the autopilot system did not work after you left the boat. And when I called and spoke to Bruce, and Bruce said he was sending Corey, another technician, down to take some pictures on the system, why did it not work? And Bruce said that he was only going to work on the steering system and not the autopilot system.
Judge, yeah, can I object for a moment?
Sure.
He's actually asking two different questions. Now he's asking about a different technician that went down just to document the hydraulic lines. So I had a better idea what's going on. But I'm not certain which exhibit from Mr. Thompson, but the one with, I think it's like 5 pages with all these different dates. On Tuesday, 3/3/20, so March 3rd, his first paragraph, after Kelly did the dockside commission on the autopilot, we went for a short ride and the autopilot worked perfectly. That's Mr. Thompson's writing saying that it worked perfectly. Again, he's not qualified to really understand what is perfect or not. He doesn't work on these things. Using it doesn't make you a mechanic. But
But let me ask you this, Mr. Wasberg, what is your objection to the questions that Mr. Thompson is asking of Mr. Larkin?
Well,
is it that Mr. Larkin would not be the proper person to ask this question because he didn't perform the work? Because when you launched into your objection, it sounded more like you were making a statement than an objection. So I'm trying to figure out why this witness wouldn't know the answer to Mr. Thompson's questions.
Well, my objection is that he even says in writing that it was working perfectly after Kelly left the first time, and then now leading Kelly into saying that it wasn't. I mean, he's saying both sides of it.
I think Mr. Larkin can answer that question, and he can say, I disagree with you, or he can say, I agree with you. I don't think it's a proper objection.
Okay.
An objection would be something like it's irrelevant, or that this wasn't the person that did the work. So the objection is overruled. Mr. Larkin, I would ask you to answer the question if you can.
So if I understand, he's asking why the autopilot didn't work after my second visit?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, it's my understanding, and I don't have it, I'm just assuming here, he had brought it to Sergio Salazar's company and they had topped off the fluid and recommissioned the autopilot again. But there was also a discussion with Bruce about how the autopilot had dumped its memory, which is why we suspected the entire system might need to be replaced. So I can only suspect about that. My second visit, we had stopped work short because he did not want me to move forward.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Thompson?
Yes, I didn't want you to move forward because I didn't want to spend $1,000 on a system that wasn't broken. I also wanted to know if Corey...
Mr. Thompson, yes. I'm going to shut you down if you keep making statements. You need to
Okay.
ask questions. I understand that you want to go point, counterpoint, but that's not how a trial works. I gave you the opportunity to
Okay.
give your testimony.
Sorry, Judge.
Now it's an opportunity for Mr. Wasberg to put on his case, which means you can ask him questions, but to say you disagree with him, no, I'm sorry, you're wrong, the boat was working perfectly, that is you bolstering your testimony, and I'm not going to allow it. So you need to stop
Okay.
doing that, okay? Ask
Okay.
questions.
Okay, Mr.
you.
Wasserman, you sent Corey over to my boat to check the steering system. What was his results?
You're asking me now instead of Kelly? I understand. Corey,
Wait a minute,
Corey,
no, we're not doing that. Mr. Thompson, we're on Mr. Larkin's testimony.
Okay.
I didn't
okay.
realize that you were now asking a question from Mr. Wasberg. We're done with
Okay.
Mr. Wasberg's testimony.
Okay, Kelly,
The question
are
is now to
you,
be asked of Mr. Larkin. At the end of this, if anybody has any additional questions, I may entertain them, but I may not. So let's finish up our questioning of Mr. Larkin, please.
Mr. Larkin, are you aware that Corey came down to check out the steering system and not the autopilot system?
Vaguely, yes.
Do you know what his results were?
Not specifically, no.
You know that he had taken pictures
Yes,
of the system?
yes.
You know why?
Show photographs of your system, the installation.
That's it, Judge.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Wasberg, would you like to have Mr. Salazar testify?
yes, please.
All right, Mr. Salazar, what can you tell the court, sir?
Okay, yeah, so I was working for Marco Yacht Sales, and I went to Mr. Thompson's boat that morning to, well, I went through the whole system first of all. I went and checked the whole system, make sure everything looked all right. And give me a minute. Is there a bit of noise, background noise?
I don't hear any background noise, but it could be that Mr. Thompson is not muted. Mr. Thompson, can you mute your microphone while Mr. Salazar testifies? He's having some feedback.
Okay. No, it was just the house. So I did go to the boat, and then I checked the whole system, and I did notice that there was a bit of play on the helm. So that to me led me to go back to the shop. I drove back to the shop and get some steering fluid because I did not have it with me. And so I bled the whole system, and that's the reason why I topped it off that day, because there was a bit of play in the steering wheel. And that's common if a system is getting air in the system. There's always a little bit of movement, and so it's more than normal. And so after that, we went on a sea trial just to confirm that everything was working perfectly, and I recalibrated the whole system. And after that, everything seemed to work just fine. So that's it.
Okay. Mr. Thompson, questions?
Okay, Sergio, you did a good job. The system was working before, and now the system didn't work and you fixed it. I think your testimony is correct. It was broken and you fixed it, and it's working to this day.
Mr. Wasberg, any questions for Mr. Salazar?
Yeah. Sergio, did you use any parts, and besides adding more oil? Was there any other? I didn't see it on the invoice from Marco Yacht Sales, your company, but is there anything besides oil that was added to fix anything?
No, nothing. The only thing that was added was oil.
Okay. And what's your opinion of the computer? Why would you have to, did you recalibrate the autopilot or just test it?
No, we recalibrated the whole system. So the reason why I went out with him that day was because we performed the dockside, and then I told him we have to go out with the boat to actually see if everything works properly. And so when I did go out with the boat initially, we checked, make sure everything was working, and it wasn't. And so when we engaged the autopilot, the boat wanted to swerve right away. And so that was a sign that it had lost its memory or something wasn't working right. And, looking, if it had happened multiple times, this was the third time it was being calibrated. That's what I'm understanding. And so, wait, what was your question? If I had added anything? No. So we just calibrated the whole system, did the sea trial calibration.
Right. So if the autopilot computer was in perfect working condition, would it needed to be recalibrated a second time by Kelly and a third time by you?
Nope. No, it would have worked.
So you would agree with our assessment as a competing company that the autopilot computer has a memory problem. It's not holding its settings.
Yeah, and what was the thing is, I don't disagree with Mr. Thompson. Well, I don't. The system is much older, and so it's common for these systems to start failing. And there are multiple variables that may have caused this. So just resetting the settings could have been a symptom of something more. And so I don't think it was one specific thing. There are multiple things that may have caused this. And just being that you had reset it may have presented an opportunity for the system to, actually the symptoms to be more obvious. And that's why it seemed like there was a problem.
Thank you. Did Mr. Thompson indicate that he had reset the autopilot since Kelly calibrated it last?
No.
And I believe from what he said in the opening statements, he only reset the chart plotter, not the autopilot, so it wouldn't have been reset anyway. So are you in agreement that our assessment, without digging in any further, but it's probably the best guess, that the EEPROM or the memory in the autopilot is losing itself and going back to the default factory settings?
Yeah, it seems
because you had to recalibrate.
like that. Because of the recalibration 3 times, that would lead me to conclude that that is the case.
I agree. That's all I have, Judge. Thank you, Sergio.
Thank you. All right. Is there any witness that either party wants to recall to take other testimony, or are these witnesses released?
Released.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Larkin, Mr. Salazar, and Mr. Norton for your testimony. You're welcome to stay, but you're also welcome to leave the meeting if you would like to.
Okay.
Is there any other points that either party feels needs to be clarified prior to ending this trial? And I'll start with you, Mr. Thompson.
Judge, I contracted with a company, C-Tech, to fix a problem. They told me, they came down, they worked on the system a bit, and then they told me go find somebody else, and they billed me. They billed me for something that was not fixed. I spent money, or I was charged, and I had the same problem after I left C-Tech. C-Tech charged me but did not perform and told me go someplace else. They abandoned me. And according to their website, they have a guarantee of 5 years of their service. They're so confident of their ability and their work.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Wasberg, any final thoughts?
If anything, just to reiterate, the invoice that he's expecting us to pay is from Marco Yacht Sales. For one, they've added hydraulic fluid, which we've repeatedly, obviously over and over again, keeps telling him he's got a issue there that has not been resolved. And to pay, the other part of their bill is to pay Sergio's time to recalibrate a 3rd time on something that's losing its memory. I mean, that's the core of what his suit is against. So he's got defective components that he's refusing to repair and expecting us to pay someone else. Anyway, that's it.
Thank you. I just want to take a look at one thing. Okay, so I just want to be clear so that I understand in rendering my ruling, Mr. Thompson, that the amount of money that you're seeking is not the return of the money that you paid to C-Tech, but the amount of money that you had to pay to Marco Island Yacht Repair, which was the invoice for, let me find it, 602, and then also the $175 filing fee and the delivery fee to serve, which is 81741, and that's what your contract or your statement of claim says, right?
Yes, okay. Judge.
All right, thank you. So everybody, I need to review everything, and I will give you a written final judgment on this. It'll probably be by the end of this week. I'm in a full afternoon today too, so I don't think I'll get it done today. It's possible, but I have a lot of stuff to review, including looking at all of the exhibits carefully and making a determination on the merits. So I will get you a written final judgment. Let me get from both of you email addresses, because I do everything by e-filing, which means that my judgments will go out not only by mail, but they'll also go out by email. That way, when it's electronically filed, it will come to you, starting with Mr. Thompson. Mr. Thompson, do you have an email, please?
Yes, it's Captain P. Thompson, and Captain is abbreviated as CAPT, P for Paul, Thompson, at hotmail.com.
CAPT Thompson?
P. Thompson.
CAPTP Thompson
Correct.
at Hotmail?
.com.
Okay. So there's a P in between CAPT, right?
Yes.
Got it. I'm going to write that again just because I think I will forget. Okay. And sir, Mr. Wasberg, what is your email, please?
It's Paul, Paul, at ctech.net. That's SEATECH.net.
Got it. All right, gentlemen. Well, I understand this was very emotional for everybody, and other than the one issue that we had, you all did a very good job presenting this case to me and giving me all the information that I need to make a ruling. And I appreciate you providing me the exhibits in advance. And April, what I will do is I'm going to review these today and probably tomorrow, and I will make sure that Jen gets the exhibits to you so that you have them, and they're all in a stack complete. So we'll make sure that you get them. Okay.
Judge, can I?
Yes, sir.
Judge, can I add one more thing?
Sure.
I've owned a boat all my life. My previous boat to this 23-foot Grady White was a 50-foot Sea Ray, which I owned for 7 years. Prior to that, I owned a 60-foot Viking for 8 years. Prior to that, I owned a Hatteras. I've owned boats, and I've been around electronics all my life, around steering all my life, and I'm not a novice. I'm an experienced. I have a captain's license with assistant towing for a 100,000-pound boat. I'm experienced and I'm knowledgeable.
And I'm not finding that you're not, but I bet if I were to allow Mr. Wasberg the same opportunity, he would probably list all of his accomplishments, his schooling, and his certifications that he holds in order to present his information to the court today. And
Correct.
I'm not so sure that whether you're an experienced boater or not, or whether you're an experienced repairman or not, would necessarily be a determination for the court to make a ruling. I think that I have to look at the facts of each case individually, which I am doing. I do appreciate that you're an experienced boater, and I do appreciate, sir, Mr. Wasberg, that you have experience in making boat repairs and running this business. But I think that what I have to do, my job as a judge today, is to apply the facts as they have been presented to the law. And once I am able to do that, I'll be able to give you a ruling on this. So
Thank you, Judge.
I do believe that you guys gave me lots of information, and I appreciate the witnesses' availability. I realize that Zoom is not the best platform for presenting cases, but to tell you the truth, I've tried dozens of these cases since we've been in the pandemic and over Zoom, and so far it's worked. It's not ideal because I'd love to see all you folks in my courtroom. But until we can do that, this is what we've got, and actually it works. So thank you again for Zooming in and joining me today, and I will get you a ruling by the end of the week. Okay?
Thank you.